The biggest challenge in music production is listening experience, because you can have a multitude of skills, technical, creative, musical, all that kind of stuff, but it still takes a long time to get to the point where you can produce a good music track where everything you've thrown into it sounds good when it's coming out of a pair of stereo speakers. So what I want to do in this video is sort of give you maybe a little bit of background to my musical education so that you can see where I'm coming from, but also go back into my archives and dig out some of the very earliest music tracks that I created, critique them and see how I've progressed and what I would do differently with those tracks now. This piece of music is over 35 years old, and it was the first piece of music that I ever wrote, The Jolly Dolly Rag. It was a ragtime piece for piano, which I was asked to perform at my school concert. Let's give you a blast of that. This is, I think, the original recording. Wait for it. Oh dear, memories. Okay, so I was talking about music production and listening skills, wasn't I? So let's move on to the first track that I ever produced. Now, this, again, just to give you some backstory, I did go on to study music and sound recording, but this was in a pre-digital era. So by the time I'd finished my education, the world was quite a different place, and I knew absolutely nothing about computers. So it was a few years later, around 1995, I decided to buy my own keyboard on which I could do everything. So I saved up the money, went into a music shop and came out with a Technics WSA1 acoustic modelling synthesizer. Now this wasn't cheap, but in hindsight it wasn't very good either. In fact, it was so poorly received that Technics only made 1,000 of them, I believe, worldwide, before then pulling out of the market altogether. Nevertheless, I taught myself how to use it, how to program it, and to my eternal shame, I came up with this. That's enough of that. Whoa. Ignoring the crude musical idea for just a moment, what's really obvious to me now is that all the sounds were just slapped on top of each other. The bass and the kick drum were fighting for low frequency space. That hi-hat, was repeatedly stabbing you in the head. That string patch that drones on to give at least some basic harmonic structure had absolutely no interesting timbral movement. And that cheap sounding lead, what was it? Every single note of that was at the same velocity. So overall, it was really a simplistic, robotic and flat, whatever you want to call it. Now, I did make more tracks with the WSA1, and I was able to put a few more parts into them once I'd figured out how to better work within the limitations of the machine, but it didn't change the fact that my mixing was consistently poor. At the time, I was having fun though, and I even went as far as making a Christmas sounding track. Hold on. There we go. Key change. Oh dear. I'm sorry. So anyway, after that very sorry period of my musical life, I put the WSA1 away, chucked it in the loft, and there it stayed for several years. By the late 90s, no wait a minute, could have been the early noughties. Anyway, by then I'd learned how to use a computer finally. And I'd worked with a chap who sold me on the idea of using Cubase. So I picked up a copy, along with one of, I think, the first orchestral sample packs. And after burying my head in the instruction book, which was about the size of an encyclopedia, I came up with this. And so it goes on. Again, musically, it's not bad, but the production's terrible. The problem was, well, there was a lot of problems with it, but firstly I was playing a generic string patch as a chord, instead of spreading the chord notes between different string instruments like the bass, the cello, the viola and violin. And in trying to avoid that excessive bass build-up that I'd struggled with previously, I overcompensated and left it sounding thin. There's way too much reverb in it, so it was like a reverb soup, hardly any instrument separation, and everything to me sounds like it was compressed to hell. And it probably was. So overall, that was a lifeless, soggy, miserable, congested mess. So moving on, a few months later, one of my contacts, who was working for a tech company at the time, asked me at short notice if I could make a techie sounding music track that they could use in a video demonstration of some new display technologies at a trade show. Anyway, I accepted the challenge just for a bit of fun and came up with this. Actually, there's some quite a nice bit of interplay between the arpeggio and the main lead there. Interesting. I was getting a bit better, and it was okay for the context in which the track was used, but in isolation, it's a really bloated sounding track, especially in that low end again. It probably sounded okay on the monitors I was mixing on at the time, but my lack of listening experience and knowing how that would translate into other environments meant that I was pretty much still flying blind. All right, let's compare that to one of my more recent tracks. Now, if you didn't already know from my previous videos, the 80s is my era. So a lot of what I produce is 80s inspired or a cover of 80s songs. So if you could just cast aside any genre bias you might have for a moment and listen to this, and we'll talk afterwards. Okay, I think you can hear there that despite there being a lot more going on compared to the previous tracks, the different instruments in there had been given more of their own space in terms of volume, frequency, compression and stereo panning. So whilst it's still far from perfect, it's definitely a slightly more polished production. So in summary, what I want to say is if you want to get started in music production, be prepared for a long haul. You'll probably produce some ropey sounding tracks initially, but with time, you will get a lot better. Anyway, enough ramble. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.